and welcome to Crying on My Yoga Mat. My name is JD, and this podcast is all about building a community where, alongside amazing guests, we have real conversations about the low lows, celebrate the highs, and everything in between. I know what it's like to go through life feeling stuck and powerless to do anything about it. Here, you'll meet yourself where you are and learn tangible tools to help you become who you want to be, while honoring the journey. You've gotten this far, so let's keep going together. Take a deep breath, and let's go. Hello, and thanks for being here. This episode, we are going to talk about something that a lot of people struggle with, and that is starting. Now, before I start, I want to mention that this topic of starting is one that is part of a much larger conversation about growth versus fixed mindset. If you haven't already, I highly suggest reading the book Mindset by Carol Dweck. It is a book that has revolutionized both mine and Ryan's lives, and I really recommend you look into it, find out more about growth versus fixed mindset before we go into that topic in a later episode. But back to the topic at hand, starting. Part of me is like, I start things great, which is true. But then there's the end part where there is a full transparency. There is a current paint job happening in the kitchen of our house, which is also part of our living room, and that's been ongoing for a year without being completed. So I can start things sometimes, but then other times I am just unable to start. Let's use this podcast as an example. So, very beginning of the year was when I decided I was going to begin my entrepreneurial journey. The original goal that I had and still have is to create a planner. And I had ideas on it. I kind of pulled my Instagram audience about it to see what they would like, what they would be into, but I just wasn't getting started on it. I was doing some research. I was dreamscaping a little bit. I had a whole list of tasks that I could do towards that goal of creating a planner. But for some reason, I just wasn't doing it. It was brought to my attention that it's a really good idea to build community around things before releasing a product. So that was one of the things that got me more interested in doing a podcast. Podcasting felt like a pretty natural next step, especially because I already had the blog. I know that I love to talk. I love to give my opinions. And so it just seemed like a good fit. So I spent a ton of time on Clubhouse, specifically listening to entrepreneur rooms, to podcasters. I spent a ton of time reading things, watching videos. I signed up for various courses on it. And one day, as I'm in my home office, Ryan approached me and ever so lovingly was like, "Hey, JD, I'm seeing you do a ton of really great research. You look like you really know your stuff. You've got some of your equipment that you need. I'm wondering why you haven't begun yet." And this is where I would love to tell you that I was like, oh, dang it, you're totally right. I'm going to get started. I got quite upset with him. I was like, how dare you? I'm trying to do this on my own. I am learning. I need help. I don't know what is the right decision to make. I don't know all of these things. I had all of these fears and fears and fears and fears, and I was not starting. But I thought that I was starting. I was like, I'm spending hours every single day researching, talking to people about this, investing my time, my money into this craft, but I hadn't begun. And as much as we hate sometimes being called in, it was very helpful for me. I realized that, okay, well, if I'm not starting, what will be what gets me to start? And the thing that got me to start on this specific thing was community. I did end up signing up for a bigger podcasting course that had community in it so that I could learn with and through them and have that accountability. And accountability is something that I super, super desperately need. I don't care for it a lot of the time, but I need it. I really thrive when I have something to be able to push back on and to push back on me. There are so many other instances in life that starting is just mind-blowingly difficult. I wonder if you have any of these similar feelings around starting. Out of curiosity, I created a poll in my Instagram stories and asked my audience if they have a hard time starting things, either sometimes or rarely. And 2/3 of the people voted that sometimes they do have troubles getting started on something. Their reasons for that struggle varied. Some of them wondered if they could handle it. More of them worried about the opinion of others. For the largest group of voters, fear of the unknown was what held them back from starting. For some others, the concern was, will I finish? They're thinking about the end part. Some people, like me in my example of beginning my podcast, get stuck in analysis paralysis, and that keeps them from getting off of the starting line. In my example, it was hours and hours and hours of research rather than beginning. Rather than picking up my mic, attaching it to my Zoom PodTrack P4, and speaking. Let's look a little bit closer at some of these examples that I just mentioned. Can I handle it? Having that thought in our minds before we begin something, or while we're looking at beginning something, is so incredibly daunting. Because a lot of these times, what we're looking at is something that we want. It's somewhere or someone that we want to be. And we can get stuck in, but can I handle it? Do I have the capability, the capacity? The thought of can I handle it also ties in very closely with fear of the unknown. In the example of can I handle it, that unknown is the not knowing whether or not you can complete what you began. It's not knowing if you'll have the energy, the tools, the support at your disposal to accomplish what you desire to accomplish. Fear of the unknown has so many factors, a lot of them outside of us. With both of these, the more that we begin to trust in ourselves, to build wins, to know without the shadow of a doubt that you will complete the things that feel right and you set your mind to, the less those fears nag. Now, hear me when I say, when I am recording this, it is a Tuesday. I need to have this podcast edited and up for release within 12 hours, roughly. So, this is something we are actively working on together. Let's look at what held me back from starting working on today's episode. 1, my energy levels have not been very good, but I've also been feeding into my poor energy levels by not fueling my body properly. Another thing is this is a big topic. So many people have so many different feelings on this. And oftentimes for my solo episodes, I just kind of go off of my brain. But this time, I was actually able to have really great conversations with some of my followers and friends about this topic. Because I really want you to feel seen and heard here. And how I feel about starting may not be how you feel about starting, may not be how your partner feels about starting, may not be how your mom feels about starting. So this episode is really collaborative in that sense. If you'd like to be able to collaborate with me and have insight in future episodes, make sure to follow me on Instagram at crying on my yoga mat. A large portion of my struggle in beginning things is perfectionism. Now, I love to think that I'm not a perfectionist. Maybe because I'm also a Virgo and have heard that my whole life, that Virgos are type A's and perfectionists. And I kind of like, ooh, but I'm not. I'm so casual. I'm so chill. Whatever. But the reality of the situation is the fear of putting something out there that is not adequate to my very high standards is so scary. I'm so grateful whenever I get input because the input so often is the opposite of what my brain thinks. I'll receive compliments on certain parts of the podcast. I'm like, oh, really? You think that? Neat! That's awesome. I was terrified that things could be thought otherwise, but you didn't, so that's cool. And you guys, sometimes it's not gonna turn out how you want it to. All of the time, it's going to require effort and dedication. Starting something is almost always hard at first. A way to set yourself up for success is to ensure that you begin in a habit-forming way. As one follower says, you have to expose yourself to a lot to make it natural. In situations where our momentum isn't intrinsic, we have to create that momentum for ourselves when it's things that are worth it. Find a way to make the parts that are dull to you more fun, more rewarding. Editing was, at the beginning of the podcast, one of my least favorite parts. It's super tedious. It takes a whole ton of time. But when Ryan listens to an episode and compliments a cut, and I'm like, oh my gosh, thank you, because I was so nervous that that cut wasn't going to be adequate and that you would be able to tell that this was spliced from two different things because there was an in there. Like, no, it sounded great. You sound very professional at this. I'm like, oh. It was worth sticking out. It's worth the effort that I've put in. Again, not every situation will be, but guess what? You are not stuck. Oh, I need to say that again? Okay, hang on. You are not stuck. You can begin something and not complete it. You can begin something and do it poorly. By the way, poorly is probably going to be to your standards, not necessarily to someone else's, because we have incredibly high standards for ourselves. You can start what you want to start. We are so programmed to not want to begin things that we don't know if we're going to be good at. Guess what? It does not matter if you are, quote unquote, good at something. It doesn't. Do you love it? Does it lead you toward a goal that you have in the future? Can you find parts of what you're doing that are going to benefit you in the future, even if it doesn't feel like they benefit you right now? Will you trust yourself enough to take the first step? guess what? You can always take a step back. If the thing that you had to fall back on is no longer there, you are capable enough to find a different way. Lean into community. If you don't currently have community, create it. Go out and find it. Invest in yourself if you are able to. Starting something new can be the launching point for the rest of your life, or a life that you didn't understand could be possible for you. I would be remiss to talk about this without mentioning values. As much as you're able to, make sure to check in with your personal values and assure that they align with the new things that you want to start. It's okay to give and take sometimes with which values hold the most weight during a time. But please don't set yourself up for a negative mindset around starting by starting things you do not want to do and that are not cohesive for your life. I value fitness. I am not about to start jogging. That's just me. My body does not care for it. It would not be caring for my body if I started to run. And that's okay, because there are a whole trillion other types of fitness that I can do to continue my value of physical health. I guarantee some of you listening to this right now are joggers and love it. Power to you. If you find out a way to bottle that runner's high, send me some. I'll take it. Thank you. Remember, failure isn't as big of a thing as we think it is. It is all information. It's data for the next time you want to try something new, for the next leap that you take. Is there something you've been holding back on starting because you aren't sure you'll finish? Because you don't want to handle the opinion of others? Or because of your fear of the unknown? Are there other reasons that hold you back from starting? My inbox is always open for more conversations like these. And if you have any specific questions about growth versus fixed mindset for a future episode, make sure to message me on Instagram at cryingonmyyogamat or send me an email, jd@jdlyn.ca. Now, I want to leave you with some quips of encouragement for starting from some of my Instagram followers. Do your research and talk to others who have also done it if possible. Remember, try not to get stuck in that analysis paralysis, in that researching wormhole. Make the start enjoyable and focus on the positive payoffs. This is such an important factor. Focus on those positive payoffs. Celebrate every little thing. It's okay to mess up. Learn from your mistakes and start again. Be strong and do your best. People love people who do their best. Close your eyes, deep breath, and just go for it. Make the first step. It'll get easier from there. And finally, quantify your outcome before you start so you're not disappointed. In other words, because I want to is a legitimate reason to start something. Crying on my yoga mat would be nothing without you and your opinion on what we talk about on the show. So here's to starting, and also to remembering that you are capable of completing the goals that you set. I believe in you, and I'll see you next time. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it on social media. You can tag me on Instagram at crying on my yoga mat so I can see what you're learning and loving about the show. Until next time.